My life has never been normal. If anything, it's been a constant whirlwind of confusion, trauma, and surprise twists that I never saw coming. I'm 24 years old now, but when I look back, it feels like everything started unraveling long before I could even understand it. I was born into a broken home. My biological parents divorced when I was just 4. The separation was messy, and the aftermath shaped who I became. My mother started dating again when I was 7, and that's when I met him, a man who, at the time, seemed like a wonderful figure in my life. I loved him dearly, and in many ways, he became a father figure to me. But my own father, he was a different story altogether. Between the ages of 4 and 8, he was a mess, in and out of my life, flitting between various relationships that I couldn't keep track of. This story, however, isn't about my dad's string of bad choices. This is about his last girlfriend, SL, who would later become my stepmother. I'll refer to her here as my ex-stepbitch, a name she earned in spades. SL waltzed into my life at a particularly chaotic time. My dad had met her while she was in a rehab group in our hometown, and she was part of a Christian rock circle in a deeply conservative, Bible Belt area in the southern US. The whole thing felt off from the start, and my gut instinct told me something wasn't right about this woman. From the moment SL entered the picture, my feelings towards her were tainted. You see, I was a kid that had already been through more than my fair share of trauma bullying due to my strange name and a horrific experience with my father's first girlfriend, who abused both me and my little sister. And don't even get me started on the fact that my parents had split up due to my father's constant drug use. So, when SL entered my life, it felt like just another woman to add to the list of people who couldn't possibly understand or care about me. The day she first showed up, I was only 5 years old. I remember it clearly because it was summer, and I was about to go swimming with my dad and sister at our uncle's house. We were all waiting for SB, and it was then that my dad told me and my 7-year-old sister that he and SL had been dating for 3 months without telling us. The news felt like a punch to the gut. My father, a man who had always been absent emotionally, was suddenly introducing this stranger as someone significant in our lives. I remember looking at SL, then back at my dad, and then pointing at her, saying, "She's going to do something bad." Little did I know, that would be the start of a very complicated and difficult relationship. Fast forward a few years, and my dad married SL. But what really stands out is how she began using me as a test subject for her psychology degree, something she never finished. By the way, I was only 11 at the time, and I had no idea how to handle it. It was a Sunday, and I was playing in my room with my cousin and sister when something happened that would change everything. We were playing a game on the computer, using the camera feature, when I suddenly started to feel off. It was like red dots were flashing in front of my eyes, and I knew something was wrong. I told my cousin, who, jokingly, said I was about to have a seizure. To my shock, he was right. The next few hours are a blur, but I learned later that I had a full grand mal seizure. My cousin and sister ran downstairs to get a drink while I lay there, unresponsive, until my dad rushed upstairs to check on me and called 911. I have little memory of the event itself, but I do remember waking up in an ambulance with my dad beside me, reassuring me that everything would be okay. When I woke up in the hospital, I immediately asked if my dad was watching the Super Bowl without me. That was the moment when everything hit the fan. My parents, who had not been in the same room together in years, were suddenly there, both of them in the hospital room. It felt surreal. The hospital stay wasn't easy. I remember being in my church dress, still in shock, trying to process what was happening to my body. My dad and mom called for more tests, and soon, I was back in the hospital after discovering I was allergic to the seizure medication they had given me. But what happened next is something that still haunts me. While I was unconscious, SL, instead of checking on me, had the audacity to lie to the hospital staff. She told them she was my biological mother. I don't look anything like her, and she was only 28 at the time, while I was just 11. My real mom showed up, and thankfully, one of the nurses knew her and let her in, kicking SL out. But that was just the beginning of the chaos. I was discharged from the hospital, and things felt semi-normal for a while. But when I went back to my dad's house, things started to deteriorate. While doing my chores, SL came into the kitchen, ranted about how it was my fault, that the church was mad at her, and blamed me for all the trouble she'd gotten into. She was 28, and I was 11 years old. She was blaming me, a child, for something that wasn't my fault. From that day forward, I couldn't stand her, no matter what I did. SL made sure to punish me emotionally and mentally. Her antics didn't stop there. She even got so insecure about my hatred for her that she asked to see my private counseling messages after I had attempted suicide at 14. Thankfully, I knew my rights and shut that nonsense down immediately. As I entered high school, our relationship only got worse. SL would berate me for everything, whether it was my personal beliefs or the way I thought. I told her I found Greek mythology more compelling than the Bible, and that was a huge mistake. She used that as a reason to further torment me. Eventually, I distanced myself from her, but that didn't stop her from trying to manipulate and control my life. Then, when I was 17, my father passed away. His death, a drug overdose, was something I had seen coming, but that didn't make it any easier to cope with. SL was left in my life, still trying to play the role of the stepmother, despite everything that had happened. The last time I saw her was when I turned 18 and got my father's electric guitar, a gift I had always dreamed of. But that wasn't the end of her. Recently, while I was in college, struggling with health issues that stemmed from the seizure incident years ago, SL tried to contact me again. She began sending me messages on Facebook, asking how I was doing, if school was going well, and even commenting on my coming out as a non-binary person. She called me an abomination. I had never told her about my gender identity, but somehow, she knew. It wasn't hard to guess who spilled the beans: my brother, who still had contact with her, despite all the drama. SL's harassment reached its peak when I found out I had epilepsy, autism, and a vein malformation in my brain that had been undiagnosed for years. I was furious, but even more so when SL, after seeing a Facebook post I made about my condition, suggested I visit her instead of taking care of myself. I nearly screamed. Thankfully, my boyfriend was there to calm me down. He stepped in, letting SL know that if anyone from my family wanted to stay in contact, they'd need to keep their distance from her. And that brings us to the present, where I'm trying to rebuild my life and move forward. But as it seems, SL's manipulation hasn't stopped, and I still have to deal with the aftermath of everything she's done. The chaos didn't end after I blocked SL on every social media platform I could think of. It felt like I was always waiting for the next wave of bullshit to hit. When my father passed away, a part of me thought that maybe, just maybe, I would finally get some peace from the woman who had been tormenting me for years. But, of course, that was just a fleeting thought, a wish that was never going to come true. After my father's death, I tried to move forward. I focused on getting better, trying to deal with the epilepsy, the malformation in my brain, and the emotional damage that had been inflicted on me over the years. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and SL was still out there, lurking in the background like a shadow I couldn't shake off. I had made it through high school and into college. Things were finally starting to feel like they were looking up. I had my boyfriend by my side, and for the first time in years, I was starting to feel a sense of stability. But that stability was shattered when SL came back into my life uninvited and unwelcome. She started messaging me on Facebook, asking about my life, how school was going, if everything was okay. She'd throw in questions about my health, about my seizure disorder, and my emotional well-being. It was like she was pretending to care. In reality, she was trying to get under my skin, trying to reclaim control over me. I didn't know how she found out about my gender identity, but somehow, she knew. She called me an abomination for using they-them pronouns, and for coming out as non-binary. That was when I realized that, despite everything that had happened, she still felt entitled to judge me, to make me feel like I was less than. At first, I tried to ignore her. I wanted to stay focused on my finals and the medical tests I had to go through for my epilepsy. But she wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I logged into Facebook, there she was, spamming my messages with questions and comments. I couldn't escape her, and it made me feel trapped. like I was being suffocated by someone who had no right to be in my life anymore. But then it got worse. I found out that SL had been in contact with my brother, the one who still talked to her for some bizarre reason. He had told her about my gender identity, about my desire to be called sibling on our brother's obituary. The fact that she was getting all this information from him made my blood boil. I knew I had to take action, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't talk to my mom about it because she didn't understand the extent of the damage SL had done. It felt like I was fighting a battle all on my own. In the midst of all of this, I received some health news that made everything even harder to process. After years of being misdiagnosed and untreated, I finally found out that I had epilepsy, autism, and a vein malformation in my brain. It wasn't just one problem I had to deal with, it was a complex web of issues that had been ignored for far too long. My neurologist gave me the news, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. All those years of unexplained pain and seizures made sense now, but the anger I felt at the medical system and at SL for never caring enough to help me was overwhelming. To make matters worse, the epilepsy was genetic. I was the first one in my family to have it, and the genetic testing confirmed that it was passed down from my father. That realization hit hard. My father's drug use, the drugs he had taken that caused so much damage to his body, had affected me in ways I couldn't have imagined. The epilepsy was just one more thing to add to the list of reasons why I felt like my life had been cursed from the start. I made a Facebook post to warn my cousins about the genetic epilepsy in our family. I wanted to make sure they knew so that they could get checked out if necessary. I knew SL would see the post, and I hoped that maybe it would keep her from trying to contact me again. But of course, I was wrong. She came back with a vengeance. She messaged me again, this time asking if I would visit her. I nearly screamed. How could she still think she had any place in my life? How could she still think I would want anything to do with her after everything she had done? I couldn't take it anymore. So I finally told my boyfriend. He was furious, and he immediately stepped in to protect me. He commented on the post, telling SL to stay away from me, and that if anyone from my family wanted to stay in contact, they would have to keep her away from any information about me. But that wasn't the end of it. SL didn't stop there. Even though I had blocked her on all my social media, she found ways to keep trying to get in touch with me. And that's when I started to feel like I was losing control again. It's hard to explain the toll this constant harassment has taken on me. It's not just the physical pain from my health issues, the seizures, and the brain malformation. It's the emotional and mental exhaustion of dealing with someone who should have been out of my life years ago, but who still insists on tormenting me. I never asked for any of this, and yet it feels like I'm stuck in a cycle that I can't break free from. The fact that I have to constantly guard myself against SL's manipulations is draining, and the knowledge that my own family, especially my brother, has sided with her, even after everything, only adds to the pain. I can't understand why they don't see her for who she really is. Maybe they've convinced themselves that she's changed, that she's a different person now. But I know the truth. I've seen her at her worst, and I'll never forget the way she treated me and my sister. I'll never forget the lies, the manipulation, and the emotional abuse. And then, just when I thought I had finally gotten away from her, the past came back to haunt me in a way I never expected. It had been a few months since I tried to distance myself from SL and all the madness she brought into my life. I was doing everything I could to stay calm, focus on my health, and keep my sanity intact. My boyfriend was supportive, always there to help me when I was feeling overwhelmed by everything going on. The medical appointments, the seizures, the uncertainty about my brain surgery. It was a lot to deal with, but I had a good support system, or so I thought. The night I went to the ER after my seizure in the cafe was one of the lowest points in this long, drawn-out nightmare. It had been triggered by seeing SL again. She had found me, despite all the barriers I'd put up. I couldn't believe she'd come into town and tracked me down like that. But what really made me snap wasn't just the flashbacks of her in my life. It was the physical toll it took on me. The stress hit me so hard that I collapsed right there in the cafe. The seizure came out of nowhere, and I ended up being rushed to the ER again, feeling humiliated and utterly defeated. But something unexpected happened during that whole chaotic episode. My family, of sorts, the group of motorcycle bikers who had always been part of our community, who happened to be relatives of ours, got involved. They had been keeping tabs on me in the background, watching over me, even though I had no idea they were doing it. When I went to the ER, they were there, and they were pissed. They didn't just want to protect me from SL. They were sick of the damage she had caused to me and my sister for all these years. I never imagined that a bunch of bikers could be my personal protectors. But I was grateful. They were relentless in their effort to keep SL out of my life. They started tracking her every move in our small town, watching her whenever she tried to show up at places I frequented, like the local coffee shop or even the library. It wasn't just about keeping her from me, it was about making sure she couldn't hurt me or my sister any further. Then came the shocker. One of the bikers, my uncle included, came to me with some insane information. Apparently, there had been an old rumor circulating around town about SL, something my uncle had heard and didn't believe at first. The rumor was about something called the Muddy Conspiracy, and it sounded like something straight out of a weird, forgotten folklore. According to the story, SL had been involved in running health scams back in the day, mixing bizarre spiritual healing concoctions with questionable substances that she claimed could cure anything from headaches to heartbreak. It was hard to believe, but with SL's history, I didn't doubt it for a second. What made it even more disturbing was the fact that these so-called cures had been linked to my dad's odd hobby of fermenting homemade wine at the time. It seemed like SL had used the wine as a base for her miracle powders, and I couldn't help but shudder. It felt like a dark chapter in our town's history, one that had never been fully exposed. But the bikers weren't about to let it go. They were collecting information on SL's shady past, documenting every little thing they could find. They called it leverage in case things went south, and part of me felt relief. At least someone was finally standing up for me, even if it was in the most unexpected way possible. A few weeks later, my uncle and I went up to my mom's old attic to sift through some old family boxes. We were looking for anything that could help in our efforts to keep SL away. And that's when we stumbled upon something even more bizarre, a dusty scrapbook made by my mom. Inside were clippings from the local newspaper, old notes, and, oddly enough, a cryptic column written by none other than SL herself. It was all about the power of spiritual powders and how they could supposedly redefine destiny. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The woman had written a whole column about these concoctions, and she truly believed in their ability to heal, even claiming they could cure anything from headaches to heartbreak. But here's the real kicker. Some of the potions she talked about were made using the homemade wine my dad had been making back in the day. This was getting weirder by the second, and I honestly didn't know what to think. Was this all some sort of sick joke? Or was SL truly delusional, believing that she had the power to change lives with these weird, dangerous mixtures? Regardless of whether or not her claims were true, it was clear that SL had a history of manipulation and deception. She had always used whatever tools she could to control people, to make them believe she had some kind of power over them. It made sense now, why she had been so eager to insert herself into my life and my family's life in the first place. She wanted control, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get it, as if things couldn't get stranger. My uncle discovered more about SL's activities. The bikers, the ones who had been keeping tabs on her, found out that she had been involved in even more scams. And this time, it wasn't just some town. Rumor, it was real. She had been running a network of fraudulent health treatments, many of which were based on these so-called healing potions. And what's worse, she was manipulating people into believing these treatments could cure all kinds of ailments, when in reality, they were nothing but dangerous mixtures of untested ingredients. It didn't take long for me to realize that SL was dangerous, not just to me, but to anyone she came into contact with. She had managed to pull the wool over everyone's eyes for years, including my father's. I had to wonder if he had ever truly understood who she was, or if he had just been blinded by his own addiction and his desire to be loved. But despite all of this, SL wasn't giving up. She was still trying to contact me, trying to get into my life again. And I was done. I had had enough. The bikers were on alert, ready to step in if she tried anything again. They had even started an unofficial town watch to keep track of her movements, just in case she tried to manipulate anyone else. It was both comforting and a little surreal to have these bikers, this ragtag group of outsiders, standing guard over me. But what was even more unbelievable was the story they told me about a woman named the Prodigal Brew. Apparently, there was this illegal tincture that SL had been using to manipulate and control people, something that enhanced cognitive abilities but had devastating long-term effects. This Prodigal Brew was just another piece of her twisted puzzle, and I wasn't sure how much of it was true, but it all fit together with what I knew about her. To make things even crazier, the bikers and my uncle were actively working to expose her, getting more dirt on her every day. They were determined to stop her from hurting anyone else, and I couldn't help but feel thankful that someone had my back. It felt like a strange, twisted sort of justice was finally being served. And maybe, just maybe, SL's reign of terror was coming to an end. In the midst of all this madness, I had a moment of clarity. My surgery date was set, and while it loomed over me with anxiety, it also gave me something to focus on. My neurosurgeon had briefed me on what to expect, and I had a timeline for what was next in my life. Things were about to change, and for once, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. But even with all these twists and turns, I knew that the drama wasn't over. SL wasn't going to just disappear, and I still had to fight to keep her out of my life. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had a whole community of people: my boyfriend, my uncle, the bikers, and even some of my friends standing with me, ready to take on whatever SL threw my way. After everything I had been through, it felt like I was finally reaching a breaking point. The drama with SL had been dragging on for years, and I was exhausted. Every time I thought I was free, she would resurface like a ghost from my past, trying to re-enter my life and disrupt everything. I had been tormented by this woman for most of my life, and I was beyond ready to be rid of her once and for all. But this time, things were different. I wasn't alone. The bikers had become my unlikely protectors, my safety net. They had set up this unofficial town watch, keeping an eye on SL whenever she tried to show up in places I frequented. Every time I left the house, I knew they were watching, ready to jump into action if she showed up. It felt strange to be watched so closely, but at the same time, I felt a sense of security that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had people fighting for me. Then came the revelation. The bikers, led by my uncle, had uncovered more of SL's dark history. They had found out about the Prodigal Brew, this illegal tincture she had been involved with. It was said to enhance cognitive abilities, but had devastating long-term effects. SL had been using this brew to manipulate people, to control their minds and make them believe she had some kind of power over them. It was twisted and dangerous, and the more I learned, the more I realized just how much of a monster she truly was. But despite all of this, SL didn't stop. She kept trying to contact me, even after I blocked her on all social media. It was like she couldn't let go, like she was addicted to the idea of having control over me. She didn't care that I had cut her out of my life. She wanted back in, and she was going to do whatever it took to make that happen. But this time, I was prepared. I had my support system in place: my boyfriend, my uncle, the bikers, and even a few friends who had stood by me through everything. When SL tried to show up at my door, they were ready. They had already warned her off, made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with her. But it didn't stop her from trying. It was like she was desperate, trying to find any way to break through the walls I had built around myself. She even resorted to contacting my family, trying to manipulate them into reaching out to me on her behalf. One night, after everything had settled down, I received an unexpected message. It was from my uncle, and he told me that he had tracked down SL's whereabouts. She had been trying to hide her tracks, but my uncle had managed to piece together enough information to know where she was staying. It wasn't just a random place she had been in and out of rehab facilities, and the bikers had been keeping tabs on her. They had all the information they needed to put an end to her reign of terror once and for all. I had mixed feelings about it. Part of me wanted to confront her, to finally let her know how much she had hurt me. But another part of me knew that confronting her would only drag me back into the same toxic cycle I had been trying to escape for years. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need to hear her apologize or explain herself. I just needed to keep moving forward and leave her in the past where she belonged. I made the decision to cut all ties. No more messages, no more contact, and no more second chances. I was done. My uncle and the bikers made sure that SL knew I was serious. They put the word out to everyone who might have been in contact with her, letting them know that she was not welcome in my life. I finally felt a sense of relief wash over me, as if the weight of her presence had been lifted from my shoulders. With that chapter of my life behind me, I began to focus on the future. The surgery I had been preparing for was getting closer, and I was both nervous and relieved. The thought of it terrified me, but I knew it was something I needed to do for my health. My neurosurgeon had explained the procedure in detail, and while there were risks, I felt like I had a chance to start over. This surgery wasn't just about fixing the physical issues in my brain, it was about reclaiming my life, my health, and my future. In the weeks leading up to the surgery, I focused on getting my life back on track. I started an online course in digital art therapy, something I had been wanting to do for years. The course became a lifeline for me, a way to express myself and find some peace in the midst of all the chaos. It was a therapeutic outlet that helped me process everything I had been through, and it gave me a sense of purpose during an incredibly difficult time. The support from my boyfriend and my friends was overwhelming. They were there for me every step of the way, making sure I didn't feel alone. My boyfriend kept me grounded, always checking in on me, making sure I was doing okay. He was my rock, my constant in a world that had felt so unstable for so long. The surgery itself was a success. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted whether I could go through with it. But I made it. The recovery was difficult, but I had the support I needed to get through it, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. I wasn't entirely out of the woods yet, but I had hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life. As the months went by, things continued to improve. I had moved in with my boyfriend, and having a stable home environment was a game changer. My health improved, and I was able to focus on my studies again, even though it was a struggle. The epilepsy, the autism, and the brain malformation were still part of my life, but they no longer controlled me. I was learning to live with them, to work around them, and to find ways to thrive despite the challenges. One of the most significant changes was the way I viewed my past. I realized that, despite all the pain SL had caused, I didn't need her approval or validation. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. I had spent so many years letting her and my father's toxic relationships dictate my sense of self-worth, but now I understood that I was the only one who could define my value. It was a hard lesson, but it was one I was finally able to learn. With my health improving, my support system strong, and my life finally heading in the right direction, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't scared of SL anymore, and I wasn't scared of my future. I was determined to take control of my own destiny, no matter what obstacles came my way. In the end, I realized that I had come a long way. From the chaos of my childhood to the manipulations of my ex-stepmother, I had fought through it all. And now, with a new chapter ahead of me, I was ready to face whatever came next. I knew I had the strength to handle it, and for the first time in my life, I believed in myself.